it kind of sucks.
It's George Janko. I am on Impaulsive. Well, I was. Logan fired me, and we're no longer friends anymore.
George Janko, a popular YouTuber and former Vine star, has announced his departure from Logan Paul's Impaulsive podcast. Is Logan's drama over, or has he permanently fired George? This video is going to unveil the reality behind all that drama. Logan Paul's insensitive comments about George's religious beliefs and his ruthless attitude toward George have caused controversies surrounding Impaulsive, a well-known podcast that George and Logan Paul co-host. During this conflict, George Janko hinted at his departure, sparking speculation about his future on the show. Fans are really very curious about it, but what made George think this? On the December 13th episode of Impaulsive, we noticed a face on Logan Paul that is just ugly and one we didn't even imagine. Given how much he seems to have grown up in the last few years, the way he spoke to George was ruthless, and from the podcast, it appears that George's situation is only getting worse.
To get you to level up.
In what?
Yourself.
In what category?
Emotional intelligence.
George's remarkable composure deeply impressed fans in the face of Logan's offensive remarks about his beliefs. It was difficult to watch as Logan displayed extreme insensitivity and irresponsibility, especially considering his supposed growth. Many fans praised Mike for effectively mediating the whole situation while also commending George for maintaining his composure throughout the episode. In previous instances, there were signs that George felt neglected and dominated by Logan, which led to mental stress and disturbance. In episode 351 on November 20th, 2022, with stand-up comedian Bobby Lee,
Ashton sucked, left me on red. You suck. First of all, don't touch me. Do not touch me.
My bad.
Thank you.
George made a big mistake by talking about his depression and his internal disturbance. George opened up more than ever on the podcast, but unfortunately, he chose the wrong moment and audience. Bobby saw this as a chance to attack, and from that point on, George seemed completely defeated. It turned into a one-sided conversation, like a long monologue. It was fascinating to observe how differently Mike and Logan approached the situation with George. Mike displayed empathy and attempted to support him, while Logan mocked him. He kept laughing at the situation and even didn't realize that it was his friend who shared his feelings. Perhaps Logan's role is to ensure the smooth running of the podcast and take care of his guests. Although George's emotions were not overlooked, it becomes clear in future episodes that Logan's lack of empathy will become more pronounced. George became a bit confused and insulted, so he suddenly left the podcast. The episode caused a significant fallout, with some people supporting George.
Over here with me. George, I want you over here with me. Chase him down. Go. You find him. George, no, go get him.
While others considered his actions unprofessional. In the following episode, George apologized and acknowledged that leaving was a mistake. However, it was revealed that, despite Logan's advice to apologize to Bobby, he didn't do so. This revelation occurred during Logan's appearance on Bobby's podcast, Tiger Belly. After that, Bobby had FaceTime with George on the show to make an apology for that incident. On December 13th, the next episode, 35, intensified the drama involving George. The episode featuring Bobby Lee turned into a showdown between George and the guest. However, in this episode with only the guys, it became a clash between George and Logan. They discussed religion, a topic that had come up before on the podcast, but this time it was different. Logan launched unwarranted attacks on George's beliefs and suggested that he needed to see a therapist instead of relying on Jesus in every aspect. He attacked him by saying that he is emotionally immature and that a therapist can teach him emotional intelligence. He also pointed out his 3-week-old incident with Bobby Lee, a comedian. Logan always disrespects George, and he doesn't treat George the way he treats Mike.
Told me I need a therapist because I believe in Jesus. That one hurt me.
No, I didn't. I said you need a therapist because Jesus isn't quite doing it for you.
He used to interpret whenever George started speaking about his point of view on any topic on the show. The setup of the podcast is also not good for George. It makes him a very neglected third host of the show and not suitable to engage with hosts. Logan repeatedly brought up how Christianity condemns gay people, as if trying to blame George for it, or suggesting that George also disapproves of gay people.
You always yell at me about gay people. I never once talk about gay people.
Because you're subscribed to the doctrine that perpetuates that information.
George responded to this very defended way. Everything Logan said on the podcast seemed mean-spirited, even though he claimed it was out of love. This interaction made many people believe that Logan's ego was on full display and that he considers himself much smarter than everyone else. He appears to prioritize being right over considering the feelings of his close friend. During episode 356 of the Impaulsive podcast, co-host and friend George Janko came under fire from Logan Paul for the way he attacked him for his religious views. Following the episode, people flocked to social media with one user labeling his friend's beliefs and the way he discussed them as absolutely disgusting. On the other side, a lot of fans admired the George. In contrast, viewers have developed a strong affinity for Mike, who is now often hailed as the podcast heartbeat. This sentiment holds a significant amount of truth. Mike has notably enhanced his interviewing prowess and displays a unique ability to establish connections with guests, surpassing the capabilities of George and Logan in this regard. He also cared a lot about George and tried to keep things in balance. In episode 359, about crypto scams, Logan Paul started the conversation by acknowledging at the start of the conversation that he made some pretty out-of-line comments to George about George's beliefs. He said that he got punished by God and faced problems in Qatar. He got food poisoning and alcohol poisoning. He talked about how he got a $20,000 camera taken away and how his luggage was delayed. So he had no clothes to get to events in Qatar. He said it was the first time when he felt the wrath of God. He also told me that a few weeks ago he met his girlfriend's parents and he really felt the punishment of God. In the episode, he admitted that he believed in God. In this episode, George still appreciated Logan's statement, and he defended his friend, which fans also noticed very well. And they hold a deep respect for George, but some of them are still very aggressive about Logan's past behavior with George. In a post, George said, "I would not talk, but now I am." This unexpected message quickly ignited speculation of a potential disagreement between George and his fellow co-hosts. These rumors gained further momentum when observant fans noticed George had unfollowed both Logan and Mike on social media, adding fuel to the speculation of a brewing feud. The rumors about a disagreement between George and his co-hosts are growing stronger. 4 months ago, he started his own podcast and said that it has no name. In the latest episode of his podcast with guest Tana Mongeau and his first friend Greg Lindsay, George appeared to criticize his former friends. He explained Logan fired him and it stings. He also talked about his absence in the last episode of Impaulsive. He said he grew up with Logan. Logan is his best friend, but it was weird. He explained that he wants to be focused on who he is. In his podcast, he clarified that he is not leaving Impaulsive, but also wants to share his own point of view. He said that Mike and Logan have their projects, and I have my own things to do. In this podcast, George was very happy and cheering. He was speaking openly about his own beliefs and his point of view about directionless things with peace of mind. It's what he was missing at Impaulsive. They talked about their friendships and past meetups and had a lot of fun. 3 months ago, on Impaulsive episode 363, George rejoined the podcast. Yes, it happened. And it was a great pleasure for all fans to see him back. In this podcast, they talked about thinking they fired him. And George replied by saying they had to get him back because of comments. George thanked his fans for helping him get his job back. Logan also appreciated George for starting his own podcast. Logan told George to share his ideas on Impaulsive and say what he wants to say. It's his own show. After that, we can see George on the show, and they act like nothing has ever happened between them. But wait, George has been absent from the podcast for a month, since episode 373. Logan has been doing this with George for a long time, but George always tries to fix it, and they continue doing things like before. But this time, fans are taking it differently. Here is also a viral clip of a live video of Mike in which he is avoiding answering the question about George missing the show. People are spreading rumors that he'll never be back on the show, but it's not the final truth. Some of them believe no one is going to talk about it unless it's Logan himself. Do you think Logan fired George permanently? Share your views in the comments about the whole controversy and subscribe to the channel to watch the next episodes.